introduce the speakers. I'm going to start with Mr. Cengiz Gunes. He is the author of Kurdish National Movement in Turkey, From Protest to Resistance. He's the co-author of the Kurdish Question in Turkey, New Perspective on Violence, Repression, Representation, and Reconciliation. His main research interests are in the areas of peace and conflict studies, the Kurds in the Middle East, the international relations of the Middle East, and Turkish politics. The title of his paper is Kurds in Iran. Although I said everything about Turkey, but he's going to talk about Kurds in Iran. And he's going to look at researching or searching for a new beginning.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm going to be talking about Kurds in Iran searching for a new beginning, and my aim is to try to understand whether the revival of Kurdish movement in Iran is sustainable, and whether Kurds in Iran can obtain their rights and become more of an actor in the region. Now, I'm kind of guessing that most of you don't know much about Kurds in Iran, so I'm going to give some more information about that. Iran's Kurdish minority are one of the main opposition groups in Iran, and we don't have as sort of statistics about Kurds in Iran, so I can't give you for certain how many Kurds there are, but approximately there are around 7.5 to 12 million Kurds, depending on who is making the estimation. Kurds tend to increase the number and Iranians tend to reduce the number. And the Kurds are mainly based in the southeast and the northeast and the northwest corners. So sort of this area and that as well. Most of the Kurds in Iran are Sunni Muslims, around 70% or so, but about 30%, the remainings are Shia Muslims, and also something called Yarsanism, which is known as Ahli Haq, the people of truth. They're also in Iraq as well. And most of the Kurds are in places like Kurdistan province, but also in Kermanshah and in West Azerbaijan as well.
Which color are they?
The yellow.
So the one on the right?
Yeah. That's Khorasan. There's quite a few Kurds there as well. And I think they went there after one of the wars between Ottoman Empire and Persian Empire. Yeah, 15th century. And now the main political party in Kurdistan in Iran is the Kurdistan Democratic Party of Iran, and it was established in 1945, and one of the key events that it was involved in was the establishment of and the formation of the Republic of Kurdistan in Mahabad in 1946. Now, Mahabad Republic came into being because of the Soviet involvement in Iran, and once the Soviets withdrew after the Second World War, the Kurds, the Iranian state overtook Mahabad Republic and destroyed the Kurdish organization there. And on 31st of March 1946, it killed or hanged the leader of the Mahabad Republic, Qazi Muhammad, and some of his relatives, and also some of the people who were involved in the movement. And after the end of Mahabad Republic, Kurdish activism kind of went on a decline, and during the 1960s, it restarted in Iraqi Kurdistan. And at that point, KDPI was kind of moved to the right, ideologically became quite similar to the Kurdistan Democratic Party in Iraq. That seemed to have generated some tension within the party. And in late 1960s, another group called the Revolutionary Committee of Kurdistan Democratic Party became kind of active, and they started a insurgency in Iran. It started in 1967 and it ended in 1969 with defeat. During its third Congress, 1971, the KDPI elected Abdurrahman Gasimlu as its secretary, and then on it adopted the strategy Democracy for Iran, Autonomy for Kurdistan. And it, given the conditions then, it argued that the only way to achieve that was through armed struggle. And the Kurds actually, when the Iranian Revolution happened, the Kurds were one of the groups which were welcoming the change, and also they took part in it, but they didn't get what they wanted, essentially. And Iran, there were some dialogues between KDPI and the new revolutionary government there, and the Kurds were not given what they wanted. As a result, the Kurds had an insurgency again between 1979 and 1982, and KDPI was involved in that insurgency, and it ended in 1982. Between 1982 and 84, KDPI, there was again some kind of clashes, military clashes, but it didn't kind of develop further. And one thing that Iran did was to kind of kill the leaders of Kurdish movement in Iran, and it assassinated Abdurrahman Gasimlu in 1989. It assassinated the other leading members of the KDPI in 1991 as well. In addition, during the early 90s, it killed many of the active Kurds from Iran who were living in Kurdistan region. So in a way, it was kind of the high-ranking people, but also it killed many of the politically active people as well. Now, the second political movement is known as Komala, which is the Organization of Revolutionary Toilers of Iranian Kurdistan. Now, it initially emerged in 1978, but it's claimed that its origin dates back to 1969, and it was established by students Kurdish students in Tabriz. It is more like a left-wing group than Kurdish, or it started like that. So it was not openly Kurdish nationalist, and it advocated more kind of social liberationist program. It demanded decentralization, and it kind of, as a strategy, it argued that Kurds should work with other communities in Iran to defeat the government and to sort of achieve their own political objectives. And in 1982, with other smaller left-wing groups in Iran, it established the Iranian Communist Party, but that kind of gradually died down, and it reappeared in 1991.
Halftime.
Currently, the dominant Kurdish political party is the PEJAK, the Party of Free Life in Kurdistan. And PEJAK was established in 2004, and it's kind of an offshoot of Kurdistan Workers' Party, the PKK. And since its establishment in 2004, it has been involved in kind of an insurgency against Iran, and insurgency intensified in 2007 and also in 2011. and Iran used a lot of force to kind of kill and destroy Peshak, and to a certain extent it has succeeded, but it hasn't managed to destroy the organization. The Peshak advocates what's known as democratic autonomy. Democratic autonomy is the idea that Abdullah Öcalan, the PKK's leader, developed to solve Kurdish question in the Middle East, and it involves obtaining Kurdish rights within the existing states. So it's not a separatist objective. It doesn't call for the creation of a separate Kurdish state, but the objective is to obtain Kurdish rights, and I'm talking about national rights within the existing states, and recreate Kurdish society, Kurdish nation, without a state. So in a way, it's a democracy, Kurdish democracy without a state. Now, this has generated a lot of debate in Turkey, whether this idea is feasible in Middle East especially, but that's a different debate. And another key demand is gender equality for women and men to be equally represented in all the political organizations. And the current demands of the Kurdish movement, these are the older political parties. Now, since the success of KRI, the Kurdistan region in Iraq, the Kurds in Iran, starting from early 2000s, started to change their demands as well. And now they demand for a federalist framework in Iran that involves the establishment of a federal Kurdish region within a democratic federalist Iran. And in August 2012, KDPI and Kamala signed an agreement, and that called for federalism in Iran based on a national geographic definition. So what they want is something similar to KRI, a region of in Iran which contains all Kurdish population, and Kurds want to have sort of the main be the main power there. So in a way, they want to make the decisions about their affairs themselves. And another demand is separation between religion and the state, gender equality, and the solving of issues through peace, dialogue, and social justice. So basically, this is a call for Iran to stop using military means to kind of destroy Kurdish movement and to suppress Kurdish demands for their rights. And so throughout the 90s, 80s and 90s, Kurdish movement in Iran has been quiet, and from early 2000s, there has been a new attempt to generate support for Kurdish movement and get more activism. And as well as Peshak, the KDPI has also increased its activism in recent years, and it has also carried out attacks against Iranian forces. There are factions of Kamala, and also there are different factions of KDPI, and they also have their own military forces as well. And another development that's been happening in Iran is the execution of Kurdish political prisoners and Kurdish activists as well in many cases, and it's always linked to terrorism. They're saying that this person is a member of Peshak and therefore we're going to execute him, and there's been so many cases of that happening. And so the oppression against Kurdish movement is continuing, and at the same time, what's happening in Iranian Kurdistan is protests and civil unrest by Kurds. And there has been quite a few occasions when this has happened, and the last occasion was in 2015. And all the all of them have a different, unique reason to start. Sort of what triggers them is different, but what all of them represent is, in a way, a deeply felt discontent against Iran and Iran's policy of oppression of the Kurdish identity. In addition, there has been a new group within the Iranian parliament called the Kurdish United Front, but this is Kurdish parliamentarians, a group of Kurdish parliamentarians who are trying to campaign for reform and to achieve more rights for Kurdish people, but it has been quite ineffective so far. Now, I just want to raise some questions and give some of my thoughts on this. The Kurdish movement in Iran has a long history, but it's been quite a fragmented one. And it's the Iranian army kind of used a lot of military force to defeat the movement. So militarily, it's been defeated on a number of occasions, but somehow the organizations have continued, and they do carry out political campaigns based mainly in Kurdistan in Iraq and also in the diaspora, but this hasn't translated to mass movement inside Iran. So one question that's interesting is whether the Kurdish political parties, the movement of Kurdish political parties and what they do can link with the more grassroots level Kurdish activism. And the indications so far are not very clear. But we'll see. Another development is can Iran actually address Kurdish demands? Iran has moderates and kind of hardliners, and when the moderates were in power, Khatemi was in power, what happened was the Kurdish rights were slightly better. Kurds were allowed to publish their newspapers, and there were like cultural activities going on, and there was a bit of a development in that sense. But what happened was after Ahmadinejad, from 2005 until 2013, there was a very harsh policy against Kurds. There was a lot of suppression. So many of the progress that was made under the reformist Khatemi was reversed. And whether Iran's reformist movement can pick Kurdish demands and kind of develop them and bring Kurds into their more broader democratic demands there's a big question mark in there, because some of the people who are in Iran's reformist movement were actually involved in the suppression of Kurdish movement during the 80s. So in a way, they don't think much differently about Kurds, in comparison to what the hardliners think. And I think Mohamed is going to talk more about this, and you can ask me questions about it.